it was Stash. That was the chai green tea that I was talking about, and it is produced in Portland, Oregon. So, of course, right, that makes sense. Portland, Oregon is going to make chai green, and this green is very chai. It's chai. It brings you back to your chi, right? Tai Chi. Last video was brought to you by chai green tea. This video is brought to you by the heartbeat of a revolutionary who wants to see Jill Stein's platform actually implemented in the United States, where we cut down on fossil fuels, where we demilitarize the police, where we end poverty and homelessness, where we stop the war on drugs, where we stop fracking, where we make this world a better fucking place, where we actually make America great for the first fucking time. I remember in the first grade, I had a teacher named Miss Nash, or Mrs. Nash. And she's the one who actually got me to read The Emperor's New Clothes. Have you ever read? And so The Emperor's New Clothes, it was about the emperor. He goes around and he's got these new dressmakers, and they can't make the greatest, outfit in the world. Then eventually they just pretend that he's got these beautiful clothes on. So the emperor's totally naked, but his, wardrobe people are sitting there saying, wow, look at that. That's the greatest thing ever. And so eventually the first lie about him wearing some really nice clothes got, just turned into a snowball. So now everybody was sitting there saying how beautiful the emperor's new clothes is. It reminds me of Donald Trump, right? He's surrounded by a bunch of sycophantic yes men. Does he ever get the truth? Is there anybody that he is actually able to listen to? So everybody's going to be telling Donald Trump how great his new clothes looks like, but the emperor isn't wearing any clothes, and the emperor has never worn. And the kingdom tells the emperor that he's walking around naked. So he's, sitting there flashing the entire crowd and the audience and showing his, big fat ass to everybody. And nobody says anything. Everybody's staying mum. He's going around, walking around naked, and he's acting like he's got the most beautiful clothes in the world. And maybe there is something to that, because the human body is beautiful, unless you're a, disgusting, tyrannical dictator. But ultimately, who is the one that tells the truth? It's a little boy. So he's going down a parade, and this little boy looks up, and he sees this big fat ass who's totally naked, and he's like, that guy's naked. And everybody's like, ooh, they all gasp. What did he just say? Did he just tell the truth? When it comes to religion, they're not wearing any clothes. When it comes to abusive parents, they're not wearing any clothes. When it comes to in the Iraq War, how many people, who remembers how the culture of America was during the Iraq War? 2003, 2004, you weren't allowed to dissent. Dixie chicks, all they said, they was embarrassed from being in the same state, and people were driving over their CDs. And so Michael Moore got booed at, the Academy Awards, and then you had Steve Martin being like, oh, he's probably being shoved in a trunk, right? So this is what we're up against. Lots of emperors are wearing their new clothes, and nobody's telling the truth. And ultimately, I'd rather have the harsh truth than the lie. Hans Christian Andersen was born today, April 2nd, 1805, in Odense, Funen, the Kingdom of Denmark. So Hans Christian Andersen is a Danish author who wrote The Emperor. Hans Christian Andersen wrote The Emperor's New Clothes. He's the author of The Emperor's New Clothes. He also wrote a whole bunch of other fairy tales. The Little Mermaid came out of Hans Christian Andersen's brain. The Nightingale, the Snow Queen, Thumbelina, the Ugly Duckling. These are all Hans Christian Andersen stories. So he wrote, a lot of fairy tales, a lot of stories for children, but these are also, mind-blowing stories. Anyways, the point is, today, April 2nd, it's known as International Children's Day. International Children's Day, International Children's Books Day. So, International Children's Books. And so, let's talk about children's books. When I heard that story about the Emperor's New Clothes, I was in the first grade. I was 6 years old. That's something that got inside of me, and it's never left. Maniac McGee. That's another book that got inside of me, and has never left. And it's Marcy Fulton. She was on the Nader campaign. She was an older mentor. She had told me that if I ever come across a woman who has no books in her house, don't fuck her. She's not reading. She doesn't influence her mind with other, thoughts. Don't fuck her. And so that, she gave me the book Teacher Man. And we should have a good, vibrant, not just reading culture, but a good dialogue culture. And if you're not reading, then that means the only influence that you get throughout your day is the shit that people say to you. And that's it. So when do you come up with your own thoughts? When do you, influence your mind with not the random bullshit that people come up with, every day? Miss Nash, that was in Gallatin County Elementary School. I was in the 4th grade when I read the Maniac McGee. Dr. Seuss, all his books, he was subversive as hell. Here's this picture. Take a look at this picture. He's talking about the nuclear arms race. He's talking about why Hitler is dangerous. He's talking about the consumerism of Christmas. He's talking about green eggs and ham. Don't knock it until you try it. That's just wonderfully logical. How can you knock something if you never tried it? Then you have Horton Hears a Who and the Lorax, which is, talking about the deforestation, which goes contributes to climate change. You have racism, anti-racism, the Sneetches, right? The ones with the stars on their belly were better than everybody else, or so they thought. And, that's a handful right there. So you got the Cold War, you got nuclear holocaust, you've got Hitler is a bad guy, you've got, supposedly green eggs and ham is all about socialism, or it was the early stage of Marxism, according to the Chinese who banned them. And why would anybody in America ban any of these Dr. Seuss books? Why? The book about the Cold War was talking about, the argument was one side of the fence wanted the toast to be buttered on top of the bread, and the other side wanted the butter to be buttered on the bottom of the bread. Think about the Cold War. The Cold War was just a battle of ideas. So we're in Vietnam, we're in Korea, we're sitting there bombing all these countries in the name of capitalism, right? Capitalism is what America stands for. We're prepared to murder and, put our boys' lives on the line in order to defend capitalism, because capitalism is the greatest economic system ever. There's only two major competing, economic systems, and we weren't even allowed to talk about the other economic system for about 50 years. The Red Scare and everybody. Charlie Chaplin was, kicked out of the country. So the Red Scare squashed dissent, and the Cold War was bullshit. It was just based about ideas. Communism on one hand, capitalism on the other. What is the better economic system? Which side do you want your bread to be buttered on? And who's buttering your bread? Why can't you butter your own bread? Let's make our own butter, and let's be rebel. One of the few days that the United Nations has designated for a disorder, and today is World Autism Awareness Day. So let's take a look at autism. That today is April 2nd is International Children's Book Day. So let's celebrate International Children's Book Day. Maniac McGee, when I read that book, basically I grew up around racism, but after I read that book, that got into me. And now I run around the blacks, now I run around the whites. And none of it, looks different to me, but I once heard this Native American saying where they said that when you say the name of the deceased, when you say the name of the dearly departed, that to the earth they're still alive. And there's a mystical quality to it, but there's also, it's true, right? If you're still saying the person's name, then their legacy carries on, and it keeps on going. So Marcy Fulton, Marcy Fulton, Marcy Fulton. She come back to life. Now, there was a Frog Lake Massacre on April 2nd, 1885. You had a bunch of Cree warriors, not the Creek, just Cree, C-R-E-E. And this is in Canada, led by Wandering Spirit. And that beautiful Wandering Spirit is his name. And they attacked the community of Frog Lake in Saskatchewan on April 2nd, and they killed 9 settlers. So Wandering Spirit was the war chief for a band of the Plains Cree. He's a Cree war chief under the leadership of Big Bear. So you got Big Bear, you got Wandering Spirit, And what were they mad about? Well, they're starving to death, okay? So, he signed this treaty, but then after the treaty was signed, they started to see that, it was a bad deal. It was a bad deal. So they had been duped, and Big Bear didn't like that. So Big Bear and Wandering Spirit decided we need to resist, and we need to fight back. Now, while it's violent, and I am mostly against violence, when I look at the history of the genocide, where are the Native Americans at? It seems like the ones who made sense to me were the ones who fought back, the ones who capitulated, the ones who just allowed themselves to get murdered and killed. So a lot of the anger from the Cree Native Americans was against the Indian agent Thomas Quinn of the Canadian government. They had put the starvation, the source of the inadequate rations, right at his feet. So what did Wandering Spirit do? He did what anybody would do who loves their family. He took Thomas Quinn hostage in his home in the early morning of April 2nd. And after he took Thomas Quinn hostage, then they took some more of the, community of Frog Lake hostage. And then they went to the Catholic Mass, and they got some more prisoners. And eventually, they were saying, Thomas Quinn, you got to get the hell out of Dodge. Get the hell out of this town. And Thomas Quinn says, I'm not going to do that. I'm never going to leave. You're never going to get rid of me. And Wandering Spirit just went up to him and popped him right in the head. So he got rid of Thomas Quinn. Not only did Thomas Quinn get it, but you also had two Catholic priests who got it, Leon Fafard, Felix Marchand, the Fafard's lay assistant, and some other, clergy. So just, 9 people were killed, and, people are going to be like, oh, that's horrible. Why would you consider that, something to be remembered? Well, this is remembered as a massacre against the whites. So not only, are we going to celebrate when white people are successful, but also when they get slaughtered, this is something to celebrate. And how did they react? Was it proportional? Because here, Wandering Spirit and 5 other warriors, Round the Sky, Bad Arrow, Miserable Man, Iron Body, and Little Bear, all were killed. They were convicted of treason, and they were hanged with 2 other Cree convicted of murder. This was the largest mass execution in Canadian history. This is 6 plus 2 other. They killed 8 people. And were these the 8 people that was involved in it? And what was the reason? The reason was they were getting their land was stolen. They were being genocide. Smallpox is going all over the place. And they were starving to death. They were starving to death. How could you look at your own children in the face when they're starving to death and not do something about it? So I'm totally on the side of Wandering Spirit here. Wandering Spirit, let's bring him back to life. Wandering Spirit, Wandering Spirit, Wandering Spirit. So they were Cree warriors. They were young, right? They wanted to do something. The bison population is going down. The treaty wasn't fair. They had no food, and so they rebelled. They rebelled after the successful Métis victory at Duck Lake, and they wanted to do the same thing at Frog Lake, but they had failed. So Ponce de Leon lands in Florida on April 2nd, 1513. That's something to celebrate, right? When the whites first saw Florida. Not all the Native Americans that was in Florida, but finally a white man saw Florida. So I'm mixed. I think Ponce de Leon, I like saying his name, Ponce de Leon. Ponce de Leon. While I, can see the significance of why, having Europeans see, this continent, I can see the significance of it, but why do we celebrate one thing, the conquistadors, Spanish invaders who go around murdering and genociding, and yet the ones who defend and fight and resist are the bad guys? No, I think that it's totally just to resist oppression. Wandering Spirit was hanged on November 27th, 1885 in Saskatchewan. He sang a love song to his wife before he was killed. Powder used to be the chief, but once he died, then Big Bear, who's also known as Mistahi Masqua, he became the new leader. So now you got Big Bear, and then you're going to have Wandering Spirit, and then they're going to, attack the people at Frog Lake because they were starving to death, and they had to do something, so they went after that Thomas, douchebag guy. And so yeah, Florida has its name because of Ponce de Leon, which means full of flowers. Florida, full of flowers, so many flowers. He thought it was an island. He thought it was La Florida because he was saying, hey, this whole island is mine, but it turned out that it was a peninsula. And then he was looking for the Fountain of Youth, right? But he never found it because it don't exist. 1913 was a long time ago. In fact, Ponce de Leon's base camp was the first mainland outpost to be populated by Europeans in what was to become the United States of America. So 1513 was the marking of the beginning of the American frontier because of Ponce de Leon. So we're imperialistic, right? Started out as imperialistic. These are white people. These are Spanish conquistadors. I don't take any stock in this. I'm not like, oh, finally, my people got here. I'm not looking at that. My people's, Simon Gertie if I can't be a Native American, but I like being Native American. I can identify with the Native Americans. Oppression is bullshit. Fuck the murder. Fuck genocide. Can't we all get along? April 2nd, 1973, LexisNexis is a computerized legal research program that is initiated. That was in 1973. LexisNexis came into existence. So LexisNexis, happy LexisNexis Day, happy Electric Theater Day. They claim to be the first permanent movie theater designed specifically for films, and it was opened in 1902 by Thomas L. Talley in Los Angeles. So the first theater was opened on April 2nd. LexisNexis formed on April 2nd. Florida was discovered on April 2nd. You had the resistance by the Cree Indians at Frog Lake that happened on April 2nd. And then autism and International Children's Book Day. Let's recognize these things and let's love